Stunning landscapes, fascinating wildlife, and sustainable solutions. We are encountering it all on the second leg of our New Zealand road trip. We're at sea again, but this time as passengers with Miss Nissy.
On the Cook Strait Ferry, South Island, here we come.
In this weather, we certainly would not have made the passage on Lucipara 2.
The next day it's calm in Picton. Our road trip continues in the Marlborough Sounds. Around every corner we are treated to spectacular views.
We make our way to Nelson, where we meet Eva Pomeroy.
Today we're visiting Eva, who built her own tiny house completely from recycled materials.
We ask her how it was to build her own tiny house.
Using recycled materials was incredibly challenging, but also really rewarding, because at the end of it I could say all of this is like repurposed or recycled. I didn't just go down to the hardware store and buy stuff, so very, very rewarding, but yeah, really, really hard as well. Yeah.
But what do you think are the big benefits from living in the tiny house compared to an alternatively bigger one?
I think living in a tiny house simplifies your life in so many ways. It simplifies it physically because you don't have the space to fill with stuff. Like whatever space you choose, you will fill it, and if you choose a small space like this, you will fill it, but you'll fill it so much faster than a big house. I spend my time sort of being really present in how I live.
It's very well thought through and very compact, but yet you have a fridge, you have a gas stove.
Yeah.
You have everything.
I honestly feel like we have everything.
Yeah. Eva, why did you use recycled materials?
Honestly, secondhand and repurposing is just my life. Like that is who I am. It's who I've always been. My parents were bargain hunters, and we would go garage sailing into the local recycle centre where I now work, and I think there's so much to be gained from repurposing things and being creative with what somebody else deems to be worthless to them. So yeah, I get a real buzz out of it.
And it saves money too.
Oh, it saves so much money.
Yeah.
So much money. Like this house cost me $25,000, which I think is crazy, crazy cheap. I guess the whole time is money thing. I had more time than money, and more like drive to use my time than drive to use my money. So I spent less, and I just spent a lot of time sourcing things and creating things and sanding and straightening things, and I think that I've gotten so much more out of it because I've had to learn more in the process in order to use those materials. Yeah.
And do you have a mortgage?
No. I had a bit of money in savings, and when I finished, I still had money in savings.
There are so many sustainability benefits of living in a tiny house that we have made a separate video about the topic. Our next stop is Nelson Lakes National Park. Thanks to New Zealand's Department of Conservation, nature can thrive here. We have not used our hiking boots in a long time.
After 20 years, it's a goner. Not bad.
Ivar soon switches to his slides.
Blah.
We are on a 2-day hike in Nelson Lakes National Park. There's a tiny lake over there, but there's a bigger one over the ridge, which is our destination for tonight. The path is rocky and sometimes steep, but Ivar soldiers on.
We made it almost there to Angela's hut near the beautiful lake down there.
After a swim in the refreshing water, we enjoy the stunning setting and light at Angela's hut.
A drive along the Buller River brings us to the Tasman Sea.
We're driving on the stunning and rugged west coast of New Zealand. Just look at it.
At Punakaiki, Mother Nature has outdone herself by carving rocks to resemble large stacks of pancakes. The next day, we get our fair share of the typical weather in this part of the country, wind and rain. We visit one of the highlights of the area, the famous Franz Josef Glacier. Yet all we see is a barren valley of grey rocks and a small trickle of melted ice.
So this is where the Franz Josef Glacier used to be. It's all gone.
It's a stark reminder of one of the many crises that humanity is facing.
To escape the rain, we head across the Southern Alps through a stunning landscape of mountains, forests and rivers. The further we get, the more clouds disappear. The sun shows itself again once we reach Lake Wanaka and Lake Havea. From Royce Peak, we get a panoramic view of this stunning area.
In town, we visit Rivology, a unique store with eco-lifestyle products and objects made from natural materials. We also check out a recycling center.
Here in Wanaka, not all waste ends up at the landfill. Instead, people can bring it here for reuse and recycling.
They encourage the reuse of materials. Their enormous second-hand shop sells everything from couches to books to TVs, while things that cannot be reused are collected for recycling. For a country where most waste still ends up in landfill, it is quite a progressive approach.
It's not far to Arrowtown, an old gold mining village with original Victorian-style wooden houses. We stop for a short visit before we reach Queenstown, the area's tourist mecca. The area is certainly very scenic, but we soon find ourselves driving on to Fiordland, the country's most southwestern region.
We venture on a challenging day hike in Fiordland's mountains.
After a steep climb, we made it to Gertrude's Saddle to get a view of Milford Sound and the ocean.
A short ride through a tunnel takes us to the other side of the mountain we just climbed and to the head of Milford Sound. On the south coast, we come across a historic example of using circular materials.
We are in the south of New Zealand, just outside Riverton, to learn more about the history of flax.
At the Flax Mill turned Museum, Vaughan Templeton tells us that his family ran a mill to extract fibres from the New Zealand flax or harakeke leaves. He shows us the harvesting work.
So when I'm cutting this, you use the hook knife based on a sickle. It's very, very hard steels, cut out of old circular saw blades to get a steel so hard it was brittle, and they will hold their edge beautifully in a pulling action. And I'm going to cut a fan for you here. I'll cut this one here. So you cut from one side, you get your knife started and you just go one cut. Cut a whole fan in one pull. And you try and go from low to high so that you get every blade cut on an angle.
The natural fibres were very suitable for making ropes.
That's the finished product. It's just been finished. So that's the piece that grew near the ground. And see on the unscut stuff over here, it's got flaxy tips. Yeah, well, that's all combed out until every fibre is separated.
The industry collapsed in the 1970s. Given that plastic pollution on land and in the sea is spiraling out of control, we wonder if flax use could be revived.
Because that's that, but see how it's incredibly similar fibre.
Very much. Our tour continues along the south coast. At Curio Bay, we marvel at a fossil forest. The trees were alive around 180 million years ago, when lava flows buried and petrified them. Via pretty waterfalls, we reach a windswept beach. Endless battering of ocean waves has carved out gigantic caves, dubbed the Cathedral Caves for their size and shape. We also see some unique wildlife up close, like sea lions and spoonbills.
The Otago Peninsula near Dunedin is where royal albatrosses breed. We have seen these magnificent birds at sea, but never before on land. We watch in awe as a parent clumsily lands with food to feed a fluffy chick. At a private reserve on the peninsula, we get up close with rare yellow-eyed penguins. The owners have rewilded a former sheep farm to provide a natural habitat for these iconic but endangered birds. They also run a rehabilitation center for injured birds.
In the city of Dunedin, we meet Deborah Manning of Kiwi Harvest.
Kiwi Harvest is a food rescue organisation. We collect food that's good enough to eat but not to sell, and we distribute it to community organisations feeding people in need locally, and we also divert that food that was probably destined for landfill and put it to its use, its primary use, which is to feed people. We collect from a wide variety of organisations, some smaller ones and some large ones. So we collect from growers and manufacturers, restaurants, caterers, coffee shops, cafes and supermarkets.
That's 7, and I think that would be about...
Our food usually comes back to our branch warehouses where it is sorted by volunteers and our Kiwi Harvest staff, and then it's reallocated to those community organisations that we give the food to for free on a needs basis. They tell us what they need and we allocate according to quantity and food type to them.
Deborah and her team's work is praiseworthy, as it is evident that wasting food is at odds with sustainability. If less food was wasted, less would need to be produced. That would make a massive difference in land, water and energy use, emissions and packaging materials.
We spent the night at our newest friends, the Dutch Kiwi Reed family. They invited us to their home with food for us. It's heartwarming meetings like these that make our trip extra special. Did you like this video?
And want to see more? Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on social media, become our patron on Patreon, or subscribe to our email newsletter on our website.